In today's video, we're going to continue to update our equipment system, this time making it so that as we hover over our equipment, we can see what stat changes we'll receive from equipping them, as well as actually make the changes affect our player, as well as the damage and defense that he has. Hi, my name is Michael. Welcome to my 2D action and adventure RPG tutorial series. Follow along and learn how to create your own ARPG in Godot 4 using GD script. All right, now welcome back everybody. This is video 3 in the equipment series for the action RPG tutorial. What we've done previously is we've updated our item resources with a new equipable item resource type that extends from it and created some items, some weapon and armor. And we've also updated our UI so that we can display more items, so that we can put items in the equipment slots, and updated the statistics UI. So right now the game looks something like this. And now what we need to do today is we want to take these items and make it so that we can actually equip them. So if we try to equip the sword, it would swap with the one that's currently equipped. And then also have that update our stats here. All right. What you'll need to get started with this, if you haven't already grabbed it, if you haven't been following along, is you want to go to the itch.io page linked in the description below and grab any of the assets. And if you have been following along, then you probably have everything you already need. And we'll go ahead and get started. All right, so let's begin by looking at our inventory data script, which we did a little bit of work on previously, but I've got that here. It's underneath the pause menu if you've been following my organization. Now this script, right, is a resource that contains our inventory and has a lot of helper functions to allow us to manipulate and do some things with it. And we've already gone through and updated this. We added this equipment changed signal. And you'll notice if I search for it, we're not actually calling the signal anywhere in the code, so we're going to have to do that at some point today. We also set up some new functions to get our inventory slots and our equipment slots, as well as this little equipment slot count that kind of tells us how many of the slots in our inventory are reserved for the equipment. And that's kind of where we left this script last time, as I recall. And so what we need to do is we kind of need to look through here and make some more updates. So what we're going to need is, let's go ahead and just go to the bottom of our script here. Eventually, we're going to need to start implementing this. So let's just go ahead and get started. We need an equip item. It would help if I spell it right. Okay. So obvious by the name, right? A function that we can call when we want to equip something. And let's go ahead and work on this a little bit. So when we equip an item, we're going to need some sort of slot data, like what item slot are we trying to equip? So we'll just call that slot, and it's of type slot data. All right. So the first thing we want to do is just make sure that we have a valid slot to equip. So we'll do a check here. We'll just say if slot equals null. And we also want to make sure that we're trying to equip an equipable item. So we can do another check, and I'm going to say not slot dot item data, because the item data, right? The slot data, it doesn't have a type that's equipable or not. It's the item data that's contained within. So we'll check if this is not. So if slot item data is equipable item data, right? But we added this not modifier. So we're checking to see if it's not one of those. So if either of those conditions is true, then we'll return. Okay. That way we won't be trying to equip things that are going to break the code. Now we can go ahead and let's get a reference to the item here. Now that we know that we have an equipable item, we can say item equipable item data and just set this equal to the item data in this slot that we passed in. I also want to find out the index of this item within the inventory. And so let me go ahead and open the inventory UI here. Let's see, where is it? I'll just open up the pause menu. And if we're looking at the pause menu, so let's say we equip an item right here that's kind of in the middle. This would be the 8th item in the array, so the index would be 7. But I want to know that so that I know, like, okay, if I'm equipping this, the item that's coming out, let's say this is a sword. Whatever item was in the sword should go to that slot, right? So we want to get a reference to that. So let's go ahead and create a variable to keep track of the index. I'll call it the slot index, which is an integer. And what this is going to be is we'll go slots.find, and then we'll just pass in the slot. Because what the find function on an array does, right, is we give it a variant, and it's just going to return the index of that variant within the array. And just in case you're a little bit confused or concerned about that, the slots is the name of the array of slot data that we have that contains our inventory. Okay. So there we go. We've got our slot index. I also want to get the equipment index. I can tell I'm going to have a hard time typing equipment today. And this is going to equal whatever the index of the item is. Let's review this actually a little bit more in detail. So we've got 4 slots, right? And as you recall, the way we have it laid out is armor is like at index 0, which is actually technically the 20th index in our items array, right? Because it's the 21st item. That's confusing enough for you. And then our weapon was 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so those are the indexes that I'm referring to here in this piece of code. I want to know which equipment item we're equipping and use and get an index of that. And that's not super simple, but let's just start by assuming that it's at index 0, which would mean it's an armor item. But we don't actually want this to equal 0 because we want it to equal the actual index of the item within this data array. So I've gone over here. I'm looking at my inventory UI that I've assigned. It has 24 variants, right? And so really what I want, I guess, is 20. And I could set it to 20, but so that this is dynamic and it works with your code if you change the size of your inventory or the number of equipment slots that you have in your inventory. Let's go ahead and just do this. Let's say slots.size minus, and then what is it? Equipment slot count, just like that. Okay. So that's going to give us 20 to begin with. And then I'm just going to go through and we got to go, okay, well, what type of item are we trying to equip right here? And then we'll adjust this index appropriately. So we'll say match item type. And what a match statement does is it takes this variable that we pass in and then we can just match it to different conditions. And this item type, if you recall, let's go ahead and look at the equipable item data. We've got an enumerable type, so it could be weapon, armor, amulet, or ring. Okay, this is what we're comparing against, because see, the type here is just a variable of this enum. Okay, so if the item type is, and how we can check against that is we can actually say equipable item data dot type with a capital T because we're referencing the enumerable, and then dot, and then we can say armor. So if it's of type armor, then technically we don't have to do anything. But what we're going to do is we're just going to increase the equipment index. So we'll say equipment index plus equals 0. And I'm going to go ahead and just copy this. And you don't have to put that pass in there. I just like how it looks. It helps me read it a little bit more easily. I'm going to make 4 of these because we've got the 4 types, right? So then we've got type dot weapon. There we go. It's giving me the autocomplete there that time. So we should see nice amulet and ring. Okay. So those are the types. And then obviously if it's a weapon, then we're going to increase this index by 1. Here we're going to increase the index by 3. And then, wait, that's not right. By 2. And then by 3. So then what that will do, right? Because our slot size, let's just assume that in my code, we know that this is going to be an index of 20 when we find our equipment index. Then if we're equipping an armor type, then it's going to go, okay, good. That's the correct index, 20, right? If it's an armor, then it's going to add 1. So then this number would become 21, right? Which that works. That's the index that we want for the weapon item and so on down the line. So this will become 22. And again, the only reason we're not setting those values hard-coded is because, again, we want to make this dynamic in case you need to change or want to change the size of your inventory. Okay, so there we go. So what have we done so far? We've gotten a reference to our item. We found the index of it in the inventory and the index of it in the equipment slots, which now technically this is referring to the equipment slot in the inventory, not in the UI, right? Because the UI is kind of separate. Okay, so now we have a reference though to the indexes that we need to be able to swap the items that we're equipping and the one that's becoming unequipped. Okay, so then let's do one last thing. Let's get an unequipped slot. And this will also be a slot data, right? So we've got our slot that we passed in. We've got our unequipped slot. And the reason we're doing this down here is we wanted to wait. We need to get our slots at the equipment index, just like so. Okay, so we needed to calculate this before we could get a reference to our unequipped slot. And now we're ready to work with this. This is actually the majority of the code for the equip item. It's just making sure we identify everything properly. And then we can just do some simple code down here to swap everything. So now let's go slots. And what we want to do is we're going to take our actual slots in the array. We're going to swap them with these items that we've assigned. Okay. If we start by getting our slot at the slot index, then what we can do here is we can set this equal to the unequipped slot. Okay. So we're going to take this slot data that we just found right here, and we're going to assign it to the slot in the slot index. Now, this works because we're technically overriding whatever was in that slot, but we've already passed that into the function. We've already got a reference to that item here in our slot. It's like, I hate when I have the word slot. We did this with type the other day, so hopefully it makes sense to you guys. But then what we want to do is just do the opposite, right? We'll take the slot that we passed into the function, and we're going to plop it into the equipment area. So we'll say slot, or slots, I should say. And then what we want to do here is instead of getting the slot index, we'll get the equipment index. And this slot will be the slot that we just passed in. Okay, so we just swapped these two items. And then what we can do here is we've got that signal, right? The equipment changed. Let's go ahead and emit that signal at this point. And yeah, let's go ahead and see what happens. I'm trying to think, did we have enough for this to actually work? No, we don't, because we aren't actually calling equip item. Okay, so there we go. We've just built this equip item function. And then the next thing we need to do is actually call it. All right, so next let's figure out how we can get this called. So we need to go through, right? Because if we run our game right now, then nothing's really going to happen. Let's just go ahead and pick up an inventory item. We still can't actually try and equip it, right? But that's because we haven't really provided any way to do that. We haven't coded that up. So what we need to do is we need to look at our inventory slot UI, right? Because each of these items is an inventory slot UI item. So let's look at the script here. And what do we have? Now this script obviously allows us to update what they look like. And it even has an item pressed function down here. Okay. And what this does is it checks to see if there's item data, and then it tries to use it if it's usable. And then if it doesn't, then it does nothing. Otherwise it subtracts one, right? So what we kind of need to do is maybe make something similar that works specifically for equipable items. Okay. We can go ahead and add in here, we can add kind of our own little code to handle this. So I'm going to actually just bump all this code down a few lines. And I want to start by getting a reference to our item. So I'm going to say variable item equals, and then we're just going to do this slot data.item data, right? Because we're going to reference this more than once, and that's a lot to type out every time. So now we could replace this with item right here, and that should still work. But what we also need to do, see, this code down here is fine if it's a normal item. We can check to see if it's usable. But for an equipment item, we don't want to do any of that code, and we want to do something different. So we'll do a check if item is equipable item data, then we'll do something different, and then we can return, right? And really all we need to do is we just need to go to our player manager and grab the instance of our inventory data, because that's where we've just been working, right? And just call this new equip item function that we wrote. So equip item. And this requires a slot data, which each of these inventory UIs has a slot data inside of it, right? Or as part of that node. So we just pass that slot data in, and voila. Okay, so if it's an equipable item, we'll call that function and then return, do nothing else. Otherwise, we'll check if the item was able to be used. All that code happens as usual. I think we're going to run into a bug here that we're going to have to fix, but let's just go ahead and run the game real quick. And I want to pick up this armor and just try and equip it and see what happens. Nothing. I'm going to close that and reopen it. Okay, it did do it. So it's actually working. We're just not updating the UI. Pretty cool. And apparently I can swap a sword and an armor. That's not good. But let's go ahead and work on these issues here. So what we need to do, right, is we need to connect to this signal that we have in our inventory data. And we actually need to respond to that, okay? And if it's not super obvious, because actually I don't think it is necessarily, but where we need to respond to this is within our equipment UI. And there will be other places that we can respond to this signal as well. It's kind of the nice benefit of signals. We can say, this guy's going to update its equipment, and it doesn't have to know who cares. It can just emit the signal, and then anybody who wants to care about that signal, who wants to respond, can listen for it. So let's go to our, I think this is grid container has it. Yeah, the inventory UI on our grid container, right? That handles all of this stuff. In here, we need to connect to that signal, right? That's one obvious place. So I'm going to just come in here in our ready function. And we've already connected to one signal on our data, data.changed. So here let's do data, because the data is a reference to our inventory data. Okay, so data dot, and then what was the signal? Equipment changed dot connect. And then we can just use this on inventory changed. We can use the same function. It should be fine. Let's go take a look at that and make sure that that's true. So on inventory changed. Now there is one minor issue. I think we want to change this code a little bit, but it should mostly work. Let's go ahead and run it and see what happens. I think we're going to hit an error here. Oh, maybe not. Except we've got something weird going on where like I can equip a shirt in my sword slot. Okay. But that's good that it's kind of working. But what we need to do is we've got this on inventory changed. I want to look at this though, because if you recall in our last video, let's look at the update inventory function. You see what we did here is we said apply focus. This used to require us to pass in an index of the item that we recently changed. But we redid that code in here and we never accounted for that change right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass, or I'm not going to pass the index anymore. In fact, I'm going to get rid of that. And I'm not even going to clear the inventory because we are handling clear inventory in our update inventory now on the first line. Okay. So all we really need to do is pass in whether or not we need to apply focus. And we don't need to, because on the on inventory changed here, we're responding to changes usually when we're working with the inventory. So I'm just going to set this to false. And so this should still work. Let's go ahead and run it. And I'm going to go ahead and grab this sword as well. Nice. Seems like things are just a little goofy though with everything wanting to assign to the sword slot. So I'm not 100% sure what's going on there. So we've updated, or we've updated our on inventory change function. It's a little bit simpler now. But there we go. We've kind of hooked this up. So let's look a little bit further. We've got to figure out why this isn't quite equipping how I want it to. Let's look at our pause menu script. Because in our pause menu, rather than trying to explain the issue with the code, let's just run this. And I want to show you one thing that's happening that isn't obvious. So if I pick this ninja suit up, you can see that item descriptions are updating, right? Bum, bum, bum. If I equip this ninja suit, you'll notice that the item description is still thinking I'm on the ninja suit, even though I'm on the tunic. So you can see there's kind of like a data synchronous kind of issue happening. That's one of the problems that we had to deal with right here. And so what I want to do is in this pause menu, I want to add a function, I guess. We'll call it focused item changed. We'll just do it down here by the update item description. Okay, so function, and we'll say focused item changed. And what we need to do is we need to pass in whatever slot was focused. And we'll start by saying if there's a slot, meaning as long as we pass something in, then we can handle the code. And let's actually handle the else real quick, the scenario where we don't. If we don't have a code, then we can say update item description, and then we'll just pass in a blank string. Otherwise, up here, we still need to check that we have item data, I guess. So we'll say if slot.item data, just to be safe. And then we can say update item description. And here we can just pass in the slot.item data.description. All right. And then in the next line, I'm going to make a comment. We're going to want to come here and actually update the stats eventually. I'm getting slightly ahead of myself in the tutorial, and we'd want to do the same down here, I guess. So what we're going to do with, I never typed stats on that one. What we're going to do is we're going to just update the stat display. Okay. But before this is going to work, we need to go back to our inventory data. So right here where we equip our equipment changes, we can go ahead and just say pause menu dot focused item changed, and then just pass in the unequipped slot, because that's the one that's going to be plopped into that spot right there. This will at least fix the description issue. There we go, the tunic. And then why is it making me equip armor? and a sword after I've done it once. This is something I'm not quite sure about. So what this tells me is we have a problem with our resources. So I'm going to let's look at these. We've got this, like if I look at ninja suit, it's an armor. But if I look at the tunic, I still have this set as a weapon. I had an issue in the previous video where this data was not saved, and apparently I didn't update that. Let's check out the weapons as well. Iron sword is a weapon, and so is the katana. Okay, that's probably fixes that one little error or issue right there. Hopefully that was all that was. Moment of truth. Okay, there we go. So now the armor is equipping in the armor slot and vice versa. Weapons in the weapon slot. Cool. Okay, so I mean the inventory's part way done, right? It now can swap equipment. And in fact, I want to go ahead and I want to test something. I want to save my game. So right now we've got the ninja tunic and this sword equipped. And then let's just swap those both. And then if I load, what happens? Okay, so that's cool because you can see that our save is working. I mean, let's quit and let's run the game again. So looking here, I've just got my tunic and my base sword. And when I load the game, boom, I've got the ninja tunic equipped. And we saved the game right on top of that tunic in the world. But it's an issue with being able to save anywhere. You have to account for those things. But I'm going to go ahead and just save it one more time. So now I've got both the ninja tunic and the katana equipped. And if I run it again, I should still have those. Okay. So you're seeing that the way this is built is working with our existing save system because the way we've already coupled things, right? We're just responding to signals, updating the inventory, and all that just working with that system, which makes me feel good that we've built something reasonably well designed if it's doing that. The next step obviously now is going to be making it so that when we change our equipment, we update our stats. Okay. Now that we've got that all sorted out and it seems to be working and we want to look at the stats, let's go ahead and actually look at our player stat UI. So, if you're looking at this little piece of UI in this scene here, we've got a script attached. And this script, we're going to have to do some work here. So I'm going to open up the stats. Let's see. I think we probably have, in our last video when we updated the UI, we added these we added these, the label for defense as well as the defense change and the attack change. So we're going to be updating these. And really the goal here is obviously to update the stats when we change gear, but also to show what the change will be. So as you hover or select an item before you press enter to equip it, we'll just show what the value change will be if you were to make that equip change. And another thing that I want to just talk about is that we're not actually going to change the player's attack value. We're simply going to display the player's attack value plus the weapon's attack value. Because we don't really want to be changing the player's attack stat that we save when we change a weapon, because then when we're leveling up, we want to keep his base attack value just what the base attack is, and then add the weapon on. That way we avoid and eliminate circumstances where we might actually be kind of overriding a value and creating weird ways for the player to spam and increase their attack or something strange like that, right? So let's begin by getting back into the script here. And actually, before we really hook into this, we want to go and do one more thing with our pause menu script, because what we're going to need to do within this stats script is to connect to a few signals, like when the equipment changes, but we also want to be able to know when we need to preview that the equipment might change, right? So that we can show that stat increase label. And so to do that, let's start there. Let's go to our pause menu UI, and I'm going to scroll to the top here, and let's add a new signal, because the reason we're going to add a signal here is because this is a nice singleton, so we can access it from any script without having to worry about any strange connection, right? So I'm going to put a signal that just says preview stats changed. And what I want to pass here is I want to pass the item data. So we'll just call that item. Okay, so whenever we highlight an item, we'll just, and if it's equipable, we'll emit the signal so that with the item so that the other scripts can react to it. And then let's go ahead and in order to make this signal easy to emit, let's just add a new function. So I'm going to come to the bottom here and I'll make a function that I'm going to call preview stats. And what this function is going to do is just emit the signal. So we'll say preview stats changed dot emit, but we need to make sure that we provide the value, right? So we're expecting an item. So let's make that an argument on this function. So we'll say item data. And then when we emit the signal, we can just pass that item in there. Okay, there we go. So now we've got a way to call this, right? Now let's go and let's look where do we need to emit this signal? Let's look at our focus item changed. In here, remember we made this comment earlier that we want to update our stats. So here we'll call preview stats. And then the item that we want to pass in is just in our slot. So we'll say slot.item data. And then down here, when it's null, we'll call preview stats. If the slot itself is null, then we won't actually have an item data. So we'll just pass a null value just like that. Okay. So there's our two places that we'll call the preview stats from this script, or from this function, I should say. And so now let's go back to our player stats script. In this stats script, what we need to do now is connect. Okay, so let's connect first to that signal that we just created. So what did we do? We did a pause menu dot preview stats changed, and then we need to connect this to a function, right? So we'll make a new function called on preview stats changed, just like that. So I'll go ahead and copy that and just come down here and create this new function. And remember, we are passing through that one parameter. So what do we got? We've got the item data. So we'll say that this is going to take in an item data. Okay, and we'll come back to this function in just a minute. But let's go back to our ready function and let's just finish hooking this up because there's a couple other things that we want to do. Right now, this stat script doesn't have any real knowledge of the player inventory. And I'd like to, just for simplicity's sake right now, I'd like to make a reference and grab a reference to that. So we'll make a new variable for our inventory, which is of type inventory data. Okay. And then here in our ready function, we're going to go ahead and assign this. So we'll say inventory equals, and then we just need to grab the inventory data from our player manager. There we go. Lastly, we're going to connect. So anytime the equipment change happens, so as you recall, in our inventory, we have a new signal. So that's the equipment changed. And we want to connect to this signal as well. Okay. And what we want to connect to that is just the update stats function, like that. And there we go. Okay. So we've updated the ready function. Obviously, our equipment now should, anytime we change our equipment, we should update our stats. And this isn't going to work just yet because currently our update stats function is only looking at the attack and defense. And like I was just explaining, we don't really want to, we don't want to change those stats when we make equipment. What we want to do is we want to combine the stats. So here's how we can do that. Let's look at our inventory. If we look at the inventory data script, I want to add two more functions in here that we can use. So I want to get attack bonus function and a get defense bonus function. And the goal of these is to get the bonus of all equipped items, right? Because let's suppose that the player has like a weapon equipped and a ring, and maybe the ring gives attack damage bonus, right? And maybe that's an effect that you want on your ring. So we want to be able to take both of those into account with this one function and then just add that. Okay. So going over here to our script, what we'll do is we'll create these functions. So we're going to have a function for get attack bonus. And this will return an integer, I guess. And then this is pretty straightforward. So we're just going to go return, and then we'll return for right now we'll put 0, but here we'll say return bonus. And then we'll make a get defense bonus. It's going to be kind of the same thing. So get defense bonus. Now, the reason why I'm going to make these super simple is because we're going to have a third function that can calculate the bonus by a bonus type. So here's the function. We'll say function get equipment bonus, and this will return an integer. And what we're going to do with this is we're going to expect an argument here. And what we want is the type of bonus that we're checking for. So we'll call this bonus type. So this one function will be able to be used to detect bonuses on any of our types. And so if you recall, we have this equipment item modifier class that has a type enum. And so that is what our bonus type is going to be. It's going to be one of these. And let's just go ahead and look at that real quick. So the types are health, attack, defense, and speed. Okay, perfect. So then let's go ahead and build this, what this function does. So we'll begin with a bonus, and it's an integer that will equal 0. Not 1, 0. Then at the end, we'll return the bonus. So here in the middle, we need to just have some code that will help us calculate the bonus based on the type that's passed in. And we can do that by iterating over all of our equipment slots and checking to see if we have a bonus modifier for the one that we're looking for. And if so, we'll add its value. Okay. Again, just looking at this equipable item modifier, you can see not only does it have the type, but it has a value. Okay. So we're going to check the type. If it matches, we'll add the value. So this is going to be pretty straightforward. So we're going to say for S in equipment slots, right? Because the equipment slots is going to return just the slots that are equipped items. And those are the slots that we're going to have. And then we'll check each slot. First, we'll say if S is null, because we will have null slots. In fact, right now we have a weapon and an armor, but no ring or amulet. So those two are null. Okay. Or they might be null, I guess. I don't know. So if S equals null, continue. Otherwise, we want to get our equipable item data. So we'll say E equals, or actually E of type, let's do this. Let's make sure we get the type. Equipable item data equals S.item data. Okay. And then from here, we're going to loop over the items modifiers because we might have multiple, right? If you recall, we can add multiple modifiers. So for M in E dot modifiers, we'll iterate over those. And just as an example, I want to remind you that when I set this up in the first video of this little mini series, the ninja suit, we actually gave it an attack and a defense modifier. So this is going to be handy because this armor could give defense and attack, right? Or maybe it's a ring that does both. But this way, we're going to loop over any modifiers we have. And then here's where we need to check if it's the type that we're checking for, right? The type that we've passed in, the bonus type. So we'll say if M dot, right? Because M is the modifier. So if M dot type equals two equal signs, the bonus type, then we'll increment the bonus by this value. So we'll say bonus, plus equals, and then we'll say M dot value. Okay. Pretty straightforward, I hope. So this is going to go through all of the equipment slots, and it's going to get our bonuses. And then what we need to do is just come up here. So for get attack bonus, now instead of returning 0, we can say return get equipment bonus, and then we'll just pass in the modifier for the attack. So we'll say equipment item modifier dot type dot attack. Okay. And then likewise for our defense, we'll do the same thing except call for the defense. All right. Okay, so these functions are going to help us get those bonuses. So let's go back to the stats. And so in here where we're setting our level and experience and all these things, and then setting the text for the attack and defense, in here is where we want to actually use those functions. Okay, so this is going to say plus inventory dot get attack bonus, right? Because this get attack bonus is where we just created the function. It's in our inventory data. And then likewise, we can just kind of copy this in our defense. We want to get the defense bonus. So I think this should be enough for us to see some changes, right? It should update the values a little bit. Let's give it a run. So you can see as I swap my armor, And this is cool because see the ninja suit, remember it has an attack and a defense bonus. So the attack will go to 3 and then the defense goes up to 6. Okay. Because the defense bonus on this armor is 5 and on the tunic it's only 1. And so what you might want to do is you might want to add those values to your description. I'm not going to worry about that right now, but same with the weapon. As we swap our weapon, you'll see the attack value is changing. Okay, so the next piece is making it so that this little label also changes, or the modifier, what the change is. And then also, so if we're not hovering in equipment, then this little +1, that'll go away. Okay, so we're going to make that dynamic based on the item that we're looking at. So this on preview stats change, let's go ahead and work on this. Just a reminder, this one is the one that's going to be triggered by the preview stats changed signal. So in here, we're going to take those labels, make them blank if there's no value change, if it's not an equipable items, otherwise display what the change is. And if it's like an increase, we'll also color it green. And if it's a decrease, we'll color it red. Okay. I think the simplest way to begin this is to take each of our labels, our attack change and our defense change labels, and just set the text to a blank string. That way, even if, so if we call this function and there's nothing else to do, like it's not an equipable item, then we will have already removed the plus or minus label there. Okay. In fact, if we run this, that should work. If not, then I guess we haven't hooked this up properly. I guess that didn't work because we didn't call our focused item change thing, I think. So let's just go back to the pause menu. Focused item changed. Where did we implement that? Did we call that anywhere? We have it in our pause menu here. We have it in our inventory data. Okay. We also need it in our inventory slot UI. I must have missed that earlier. So each slot itself, right? Here, each of these has an item focused function. So what we need to do in this, not the unfocused here, but this item focused function, we need to come in here, and we just don't need most of this anymore. And you can see how we're calling the pause menu update item description. I'm going to go ahead and just delete all that. And in place of this, we have this new focused item changed. Let's go ahead and call that. So it's pause menu dot focused item changed. And then we just need to pass in the slot, which is the slot data attached to this node, right? Okay, so this is gonna fix that. Then again, like if we look at this focused item changed, you can see that we are updating the description still, and we don't need to worry about the null values anymore. That was check code needed for how our inventory used to be built, but not really needed. So now if we run it, we should see some change. Yeah, you can see how right now with the attack and defense, there's no bonus shown. So it's just the attack and the defense. But it doesn't work when we hover an item that's equipable. So let's go back and let's finish that up. So let's look at our on preview stats changed function. We've only done a tiny bit of work. We need to do quite a bit more. So next thing we'll do is we'll just do a check. We only want to run this if this is an equipable item function. So we'll say if not item is equipable item data, then we'll return. Okay, so for regular items, we'll just stop right there, right? So we'll just clear the labels. And then we can get into what we need to do. So we'll start by saying we want to get the equipable item. We'll just call it equipment, which is an equipable item data equals the item. Now, the reason we did this, we already had an item that has item data, but now that we know that it's an equipable item data, we want to cast it as such so that we can actually access those bits of code more easily. And so here we'll say, let's set up a couple more values because we need to know what the potential bonus to the attack would be as well as the defense, right? So I'm going to call these the attack delta and the defense delta. So we'll say variable attack underscore delta, which is an integer. And I'll just set it to 0. And then we'll say variable defense delta, also an integer, also set it to 0. Now the next step is that we want to update the labels for both our attack and our defense labels. And because we're going to be doing the same action with both of those, let's first create the little function that we'll need to update these labels. So we'll make a new function that will be called update change label. And the update change label, we need to provide this function two things. We're going to want to know what label we want to change. So that's going to be a label of type label. And then we want to know the value that we're changing it to. And we'll pass in an integer, just what the value of the change is. So it'll be this attack delta or defense delta is essentially what we'll pass in. Okay. And then what we can do here is we'll do a check, because if the value is greater than 0, we want to make it green. And if it's less than 0, we want to make it red. And additionally, we want to make sure there's like a plus or a minus associated with each label. So we'll start with the if value is greater than 0. Then what we'll do is we'll set the label text we'll give it a plus, and then we will add the value, but we need to convert it to a string. So we'll go str value like that. And then we will also modulate the label. So we'll say label dot modulate equals, and then I'm going to use one of the default built-in colors. So color dot, and there's some good greens. I really like this light green. Where is it at? Right here. That'll look good on our dark UI. And then we'll have an else if or an elif. Now we could just do an else, but we don't want to include values if they're 0, because if they're 0, I don't want to update the text, because as you remember, we set it to blank here. So that'll be, if the change is 0, we'll just ignore it. Okay, so elif value is less than 0, right? Because these ifs don't include 0. Okay, so if the value is less than 0, then what we'll do is we'll set the label.text equal to, and we'll just convert the value to a string. Because if it's a negative value, we will get that minus before the value. So we don't need to do a minus. And then we can simply modulate it to a red color. And there's this Indian red that'll look good. Okay. So now what we can do here is we can just call this function twice. We'll say update change label. And first we'll pass in the attack. Not the label underscore attack, but label underscore attack underscore change. And then we'll pass in the attack delta. And let's actually instantiate these values as a 1, just so that we can see that working. So we'll do the same thing here, except replace these with defense. Okay. So let's see what happens when I run this. Now I should be able to see, yeah, when I highlight an item, I get a +1, +1. Okay. Because obviously we're not calculating what that difference is just yet, but we're just telling it that it's +1 on both. Okay, but that's good because this is working. And if we change the defense delta to -1 and run that, then you'll see that that should be a -1. Yeah, I guess I got to pick something up. Yeah, there we go. See, the defense is -1 and it's red. Okay, awesome. So now what we need to do is we need to find a way to calculate these attack and defense delta values. And what we'll do is, how we've got this, if we look at our inventory data scripts, we've got a script to get an attack bonus and get the defense bonus, and we're using that to update our stats. And then we've got this get equipment bonus. Let's create just a couple more functions here. We'll create one for a get attack difference, or maybe get attack bonus difference. So we'll say func get attack bonus diff, and this should return an integer. Okay, so we can plug it in right there. And I'm going to go ahead and set some of this up. So obviously we're going to calculate a value. The difference by default will be 0, and then we'll return that difference. Okay, obviously there's going to be more in between here. But this get attack bonus diff also needs us to pass in the item that we're trying to compare the difference to, right? So let's just plug that in here as an argument. So we want an item that is of type equipable item data. And then what we can do is within this function, we want to start by calculating what the value is before and after this item were equipped, so that we could kind of see what the change is. So we'll say before int equals, and then we can just call this get attack bonus, right? Because that's going to get us whatever our value is currently. And then for the after, we need a new way to get this. And what I'd like to do, and I'm going to go ahead and comment this out, I want to be able to reuse this get equipment bonus function. The catch is we need to be able to say, hey, I want to get an equipment bonus, but maybe with this new item as part of my equipment. And we can actually do that, and it'll work fairly seamlessly. In our get equipment bonus, let's just add an additional argument, and we'll call it compare. And this will be an equipable item data, because that's what we're going to have to pass in. And let's set it to null by default. That way, our former calls to this function don't need to provide that argument, and it will continue to work as is. But then what we need to do now is where we get our equipable item data right here, we need to check if it's the same type of equipment as the one we want to compare with, and we have one that we want to compare with, then we want to swap that item out. So here's what we'll do. We'll say, first of all, do we have a compare item? So if compare, right? That's the same as saying if compare does not equal null or something like that. So if compare, then we'll check, is the equipment type, e.type, equal to the compare.type? So that's going to tell us if they're the same. And if they're the same type of equipment, we know we can only have one of each equipped. Then we'll just say e equals compare, and then we'll just continue on as usual. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. And then what we can do here for our after, we can call get equipment bonus. And it's going to look a lot like this, right? Where we're getting for an attack type, because that's what this function is checking. But we also need to pass in the item that we've got in our arguments here. So pretty straightforward function. The only thing that we need to do to make this work then is, instead of just returning the difference, we first need to calculate it. So in fact, what we can do is we could even get rid of the difference. We can just do it in line right here. So let's just go, the difference is the before minus the after, right? Or I guess the after minus the before. So let's say after minus before. So that means if it's higher, if the value after equipping is higher, then we'll get a positive number. And if it's lower, we'll get a negative number. So let's just copy this function and paste one under get defense bonus, and we'll do essentially the same thing. So get defense bonus. And the only change is we just got to change this to do check against our defense. Okay, just like that. So if I save this and go back to the stats, then right here where we're calculating our delta, let's plug in these functions. So we'll say inventory dot get attack bonus diff and pass in the item, or I guess it's the equipment. Okay. And then likewise down here, we'll just call this get defense bonus difference. And there we go. So now we'll be calculating our value based off of that new function and passing it into our labels. So I'm going to cross my fingers and hope this works. All right, there we go. So we can see that this tunic, or this ninja suit, will give us +1 attack, +4 defense. And then if we swap it out, now the tunic is -1 attack and -4 defense. And it should work for this katana that we've got in the treasure chest as well. -1, -4. Okay, here we go. +4 attack for the katana, -4 attack for the iron sword. Okay, so far, so good. I think things are working out quite nicely. All right, so let's do one more thing to wrap up this video, and let's make it so that inventory change and those stat changes actually affect our weapon. If we look at our player script right now, we do have a connection to the player leveled up signal, so that when the player levels up, we can update his attack and defense. But we also need to do this now when the equipment changes. So let's go player manager dot let's see, where is it? Inventory data dot equipment changed, and then we'll connect. And let's make a new function. We'll call it on equipment changed. And now we need to go create that. So let's just go to the bottom of the file here and create our new function on equipment changed. I'm making this as a separate function just in case we need to do things in the future. But right now, all we really need to do is update our damage values. In fact, we could probably just connect that and be okay, but this makes it a little bit more modular. If you ever want to do anything else on equipment change, this is the place to do it. But of course, before the update damage values works, and we want this to work properly here, we've got our attack, and we're setting our attack hurtbox and spin hurtbox damages here. But what we want to do is we actually need to calculate this now based on our equipment. So let's make a new variable that we'll call damage value. And this will be an integer. We'll simply set it equal to the attack plus, and then we can call the get attack bonus function in our inventory. So we go player manager dot inventory data, and then we'll say get attack bonus. And then what we can do down here is, instead of setting our damage to our attack, we'll just plug in the damage value, and same with the spin. And there we go. I guess one other thing we should do here is we should go find our defense. So in our take damage function, here we use our defense, but we want our defense to include that value as well. So what we want to do here is we want to add this defense bonus, right? But let's go ahead and get a way to store that. So let's come up here. Here's our defense, and let's do another one. Let's just call this defense bonus. Integer equals 0. And then when we find our take damage, we can minus defense bonus. Okay. And then the last thing we need to do is we need to set our defense bonus. So we'll go ahead and use this on equipment changed. So see how that was nice? I didn't have to update damage values, or I didn't have to go, connect to a secondary signal. If we would have connected to just update damage values before, then I wouldn't have this here. So we'll say defense bonus equals, and then we'll call get our inventory and call that. So player manager dot inventory data, and then we'll call get defense bonus. There we go. Okay, let's go ahead and run this, and we'll test it out. So now I should be able to see that I'm doing the appropriate amount of damage. And I'm not going to equip weapons yet. Right now we should be doing 2 damage because our attack is 2 currently. So let's hit one of these guys. There we go. And now if I equip this katana, what did it say? 6. Nice. And let's equip the ninja outfit. Oh, I just leveled up. I'm like, why is my attack 8? It's because I leveled up. So let's just test this one. I hope I don't level up again. I did. 9, 10. We should do 10 damage now. Awesome. There we go. So we've managed to get our equipment working. We can now actually equip it, and it'll even increase our stats and the damage that we do. I hope this has been useful. A little bit back and forth on this one, a little bit fast and loose at times. But next time, what we're going to be doing is we're going to actually be updating the player sprite and the weapon sprite based on the equipment. So you're not going to want to miss that one. And I want to give a shout out and a thanks to my Patreon supporters. And as always, we'll see you next time.